Hey y'all, Sojourn is arguably the most broken hero since Brigitte for what she could do for her role and the longevity of her dominance. There's really no DPS that can be as versatile as she is while having unreal playmaking potential. And we can talk about the mercy damage boost thing because it's a current topic. At the root of it, it's still Sojourn who's the issue, but that's a separate discussion for another day. For now, I want to briefly go over why her kit is strong, and then I'll get into the rework idea. So here's what Sojourn can do. Insane mobility, arguably the best out of all DPS. And then range damage. Admittedly, not as great as Soldier or Ashe, but when she's in her effective range, she can compete. And it's not bad with its range, like Tracer or Sombra would like to be dealing damage from farther distances, but she's by no means a sniper, right? Until we include the Railgun, which is a jacked up version of Helix Rocket that does actually more damage to the body and can headshot. So you got those two things working for you. And don't tell me that thing doesn't one-shot, because at 195 damage with a full charged headshot, you could breathe on the person and they would topple over. Like in the midst of a fight, people are taking poke damage everywhere where you're just going to kill that person, and more times than not, you're going to be spraying your normal primary fire, and then you land the headshot. You're going to kill that person. So that is a one-shot. And then the fourth thing is Disruptor Shot, which isn't the defining feature, but the zoning aspect makes it quite useful. So those are the four things that Sojourn has. And I want to preface by saying Sojourn is by no means a hero you can simply pick up and win. That's where my Brig argument falls apart. But compared to her peers, the equilibrium point, I guess you could say, between skill and value is the highest. So a fun little game I like to come up with is hero comparisons. So let's try Widowmaker versus Sojourn. Widowmaker wins all the time in the long range, in long sightline maps like Circle Royale, Junkertown, Havana, if that still exists, Widowmaker wins. But on those close sightline maps, or where you don't have as many long sightlines in the map, then Sojourn is better because she can fight in the close range. Her mobility is better because of the shorter cooldown duration, but the function of it is still pretty dang good. Like I would say the function of Widowmaker's grapple is better, but because it's on a longer cooldown, overall Sojourn's movement ability is better. And then long range, still Sojourn can compete because you can one shot, or practically one shot. So yeah, anyways, and then let's try Genji. Genji's a fun little one too, kind of showing off the DLC heroes compared to the not DLC heroes. But here we go. So close range, or let's try far range. Genji definitely is not the best at that, but close range and his mobility is what he excels at, right? Okay, well, Sojourn, she's got the range. Okay, so that's +1 for Sojourn. Then in terms of time to kill, Genji, it takes 2 shurikens, or 2 fanned shurikens, I don't know, you would call it, right clicks to the body and a dash in order to kill someone. Well, for Sojourn, you've got the railgun, and then so 130 damage plus 7 more bullets because it's 10 damage per bullet. Well, yeah, I think the time to kill is very similar. So time to kill wise, like Sojourn still wins, or ties. So ranged, very good time to kill. Movement, okay, Genji I think wins because he's got the double jump and all that sort of stuff. But just like comparing dash and power slide, I would say power slide's better because you still reach most of the high grounds in the game, so you don't have as much vertical control as dash does, but you move horizontally further than dash does, so it's a better like escape. It also doesn't deal damage, so there's another argument, but they're pretty close as well too, right? And then deflect and Disruptor Shot, you can kind of compare. So like it's crazy to think that a flanker that specializes in mobility and close range combat is very close to a hero who can do all of that but also from range. It's a crazy thing to have. And Torbjorn, this is a funny one, kind of intriguing. Torbjorn against Sojourn. Torb has the highest winning percentage. If not, it's between him and Symmetra. But Torb gets most of his value from turret. But if you were to break it, then he's more or less a distraction. And most of his value comes from the turret. And that's the second thing that makes him so good, is that people try and initiate a duel with him when in reality he's a tough nut to crack because of the overload ability. Yet the ability is more of a sustainability and not an escape type ability. So he has to stand his ground, kind of like Baptiste. They don't leave the situation, but they're very good at just like holding their ground. Whereas I would say having the ability to run away from a situation is better than staying in the situation but being very powerful, right? And this is more or less to prove that when you look at Sojourn's kit, what weaknesses does she have? What tools doesn't she have? Because like she's so good at everything and has numerous ways to interact with anything. And all these other heroes don't have the same amount of tools or lack in some department. But that's the thing that holds everything together, is the railgun and movement. Those are the top tier abilities that are core to her success, where if you nerf one, she becomes a D tier hero. But also if you nerf one of them and it's not significant enough, she's still meta and it really only hurts the low ranks. That's especially what the weapon spread nerf did, because if low ranks aren't consistently opening the fight with a railgun shot to the body of your head, doesn't really matter, then it just means Sojourn doesn't deal as much damage like Soldier 76. I can only assume the nerf was intended to reduce the uptime of the railgun for high ranks, which it did, and I think the nerfs coming through are actually better for her kit, just overall as a hero design, because it forces players to play her properly instead of a Soldier or Ashe that likes to perch on a high ground. But high ranks are still going to hit someone with the railgun. So that's kind of the details that we're going to look at and basically describe a little bit of my approach to these reworks. So the first one, we want to keep Sojourn's identity, and it's between the railgun and power slide, but I think the most important of these is the power slide. Sojourn fits into the range for sniper class heroes, that being Widow, Ashe, Cassidy, Hanzo, and Soldier, and that mobility is a distinguishing factor between her and the other heroes. So I would like to keep that over anything, right? So the ability to move around the map freely to create pressure zones from different high grounds, and it's on a short cooldown. I want to keep that. It's kind of like a tracer element. So the power slide stays the same, as well as a disruptor shot. Maybe I could suggest increasing the radius by 1 meter, but it's one of the better balance abilities in the game. You can just kind of take that as you wish. I think the slow though on the disruptor shot was just too much, and no one wants to have their movement speed slowed. And that leaves the railgun and the weapon itself. Basically, this is my take on how to nerf the skill ceiling of Sojourn while maintaining the usability in low ranks, which I think the balance team failed to do. They tried, and like they did okay, but they're really trying to hold on to the movement and the railgun identity of Sojourn. So this is where I come in. So railgun, it now has a cast time like on a sleep dart or Maze icicle shot. You could make it similar to Winston's gun, or a better example is a fusion rifle from Destiny. You could pre-charge it, right? But after a certain threshold, it shoots, and it would still have the mechanics of charging up the railgun just by dealing damage. It would keep that mechanic, but that's the function of the railgun part of things. As some compensation, revert the headshot damage multiplier to 2 times instead of 1.5 times. I think this was a band-aid solution, and this type of balancing adds to more confusion when you look at Overwatch. I don't really like it, because now this is like really proving that it's a MOBA type game where they're trying to alter the effect of things. I'm like, no, just keep it as a shooter, have different abilities that are cool and interact in different ways. I think Ramacha is a cool hero in that sense, because there's different ways you can interact, like the fact that his slow, I forget what the ability is called, but the slow can drag people like Pharah out of the sky. I think that's a cool interaction that you can have. So just keep doing that. Just don't change the numbers in weird ways. I think Kiriko's unique because she can 3 times, right? And that's unique to her kit. But for everyone else, just keep it a whole number, please. The last change is to the max damage of the railgun. It will now deal 100 to the body, which also means 200 to the head. This makes it so Mei or any other 250 HP hero or 225 HP hero, I'm looking at you, Cassidy, to play and not have their extra 50 HP just be for decoration. So again, making it so that the one shot isn't as impactful. It doesn't kill absolutely everyone. Like if they reverted it back to a 2 times damage, it does 260, right? 130 times 2. But if you were to have the railgun at 100, 200 to the head, boom, you got that. Remember too that there's fall off damage, and that could play a part in the inability to one shot from long distances. So again, if we're really trying to work on the one shot ability from Sojourn, we want to make sure that she doesn't do it as well as Hanzo or Sojourn. You don't want her bubble to intrude on their bubbles, so to speak. What else? The railgun charges the exact same way, and the damage scale is the same, literally. Okay. So what I think this railgun change does is keep Sojourn in her effective range while maintaining the identity, or rather the intention of Sojourn being a pseudo sniper, another hero like Hanzo or competes with Widow, like I mentioned earlier. In theory, yes, she can one-shot across the map. Practically, she can one-shot as of now, but the delay makes it harder to time and hit a moving target. So this really can only punish heroes who aren't moving, like scoped Ana, which a Widow or Hanzo can do anyway, right? So it's not that much different. Otherwise, the only consistent way to hit the railgun is when you're closer to a target and the hitbox is bigger. So again, we want to force her to a close range type space. One thing to tinker with is the beam radius. If it was smaller, then it would entice more people to hit the body rather than aim for the head. But yeah, one thing you can kind of think about. Currently, it is comparable to Hanzo's arrows, the projectile size. And if you didn't know, projectiles have larger hitboxes. So yeah. One note about the charge up time, I like how it is because you can have the minimal energy and still shoot, or even if you always get to 100 charge, you can usually shoot twice compared to Soldier's Helix rocket. So the uptime, I think, is a cool thing for just her ability just to press buttons. I think the most fun heroes are the heroes that you press the most amount of buttons, which is funny to say it in that type of way, but that's what I believe. That then leaves the weapon, and as it stands now, the weapon spread or the cone, I think it's balanced too. You can't kill a Pharah, but you can poke at people from range still, right? So you don't want to intrude on other people's places, right? So if you want to differentiate, I think I said that right. Sojourn is like, Soldier is more of a counter to Pharah than Sojourn is, and so you want to keep her identity but not intrude on other people's identity. You don't want hero overlap, which I think is a huge problem in this game right now. But yeah, and with that said, there's nothing really to change to the weapon as of now. I think it's really good. I think though the magazine size could be larger. You could make it larger and you would improve the volume of damage that she can output over time. You keep the weapon pretty much the exact same. She just has more ammo. So I don't think it's too much of a change, especially knowing that the railgun is harder to land too, and the weapon maintains the RNG factor. I think 60 is a good spot for her magazine. The fire rate is good because you don't want Sojourn to just melt targets in duel scenarios, right? If you're up close, you don't want her to have the same time to kill with just her weapon, not including the railgun as tracer, right? So you just keep it as is. Otherwise, you nerf the damage, and then sooner or later, you're just left with Sombra's gun now. So being 10 damage per bullet and the railgun damage being 100 instead of 130, you could buff the weapon damage to 12, keep the fire rate and all that sort of stuff, but that's probably too generous. Those are some things you could tweak. I think though the magazine size would be nice because who doesn't love to just shoot a bunch of bullets out? So yeah, that's it. Those are my Sojourn rework premise. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, or just tell me one thing that you think would fix Sojourn. I once thought about what if she shot a fan of projectiles like a shotgun, but later I realized that's just because it sounds cool. It doesn't mean that it would function with everything else. But yeah, until then, I'll see you when I see you. Peace.